Okay, so let's talk about my lens collection. Your collection of lenses, your collection of any kind of equipment is going to be focused on the kind of work that you do. For me, that is in the majority documentary work. There's also, of course, corporate work, a little bit of commercial product stuff, but for the most part, it is documentary focused. And so that is how I've built out this lens collection. So let's jump in and talk about all the different lenses here. And of course, first I want to talk about a pair that really don't need any introduction, the Canon 7200 f2.8L IS2 and the Canon 24-70. All my lenses are Canon mount because I'm shooting on the Canon C200, or I'm shooting on the Canon C100, or I'm shooting on my Sony a7S II, which I've gone ahead and adapted over to Canon EF mount. And so that's just my choice, and you'll see all of these are native EF mount, except for one other, which we'll get to later. But yeah, the 70-200, not too much else to say about this lens. You see this all over the place, especially with event photographers, event videographers. It is a big, heavy lens, but it is sharp, it is stabilized, it's great in low light. I went with a version 2 instead of version 3 just because I wasn't super convinced that the optical improvements were worth the money, and these are pretty available on the used market for reasonable prices. It's expensive, but it is such a solid telephoto option to have when you're outside, when you're shooting sports, all that kind of stuff. You just kind of got to have one in your kit. And then of course the 24-70 got a little focus gear on there. The 24-70 is my go-to for almost everything. It is not the world's most exciting lens to shoot with, but it's just pretty good at a whole lot of things. 24-70 is a decent zoom range. 2.8 is decent for low light situations. So if I'm walking into a location that I've never seen before and I know I'm gonna have to stand up and shoot real quick, chances are the 24-70 is on my camera because it just gives me a lot of options. Now, another Canon zoom I've got on the table here is the Canon 24-105 f4 stabilized. This one is my go-to for everything outdoors. I can be on this all day if I'm shooting a sports camp or some kind of an event that's taking place outside. This thing is awesome. Having it be f4 means that it's not going to be fantastic when you don't have control of lighting inside or if you're somewhere without a lot of lighting, but I love having 24 on the wide end and reach all the way out to 105. And of course, image stabilization, that just comes in so handy when you're shooting run and gun. So this is always in my kit if I'm going to be shooting outside for the majority of the day. The other Canon zoom in my kit is the Canon 16-35. It's not the sharpest lens in the world. It's got a little bit of distortion on the wide end, but on the C200, on the C100, these crop sensor cameras, sometimes you just want to get a little bit wider, and the 16-35 does an awesome job with that. For the past year, really, I've shot almost everything on zooms, and that's just because I've been in these documentary situations, and so that's gotten me a little bit away from primes, but we'll get to it. Things are changing, and first of all, when we're talking about primes, I want to talk about the Canon 35 f2 IS. I love this lens. It is so sharp. It is small, it is compact, it's stabilized. F2 is fantastic for letting in a good amount of light onto your sensor, and this lens really packs away. It disappears into your kit. So one thing that I will roll with a lot is the 24-105 if I know that I'm gonna be outside and I might be doing some day interiors, so chances are I'm okay. But if I end up somewhere where I need more light, this thing disappears into the kit, or you can put this in a pocket, in a small bag that you're carrying with you. And if you end up in a situation where you need some more light, you throw on the 35. Love this focal length. It's awesome on full frame, and honestly, I don't mind it as kind of an in-between focal length on an APS-C or Super 35 sensor. So that is the Canon 35 IS. And now I want to talk about two other primes that are here, but first, gotta do a quick lens change. Okay, so lens change complete, and that lets me talk about the lens that was filming this a second ago, the Sigma 24mm Art and the matching pair, the Sigma 50mm 1.4 Art. These are the newest additions to my kit because this year I want to shoot more on primes again. I shot my first feature doc all on primes. Those were Rokinon Cine primes that I had at the time then, and I want to get back to it because again, I've been shooting a lot with zooms this year, and so these two are great. They are pretty sharp. They are native EF mount. Autofocus it's usable if I need it. You know, it's a little bit loud, but it's usable if I need it. And having f1.4 available is awesome for me, especially shooting on APS-C Super 35 sensors in the C200 and the C100. Now I know like I was on the come up in the 5D2, the 5D3 when everybody was shooting at like f1.4 wide open, blowing out the background, nothing's in focus, all that kind of stuff. But I will say there's a distinct difference between, you know, even shooting these a little stop down, f1.8, f2, versus shooting on these zooms that are f2.8. And that's a look that I prefer, especially for a lot of interviews. And I just want to stretch myself creatively a little bit here in the new year. And then we will talk about the last prime on the table, this tiny little lens, which I've adapted to EF mount from its original M42 mount. This is the Helios 44-2. Doesn't really need any introduction. This is a cool vintage lens, and it's kind of the gateway for people. If you're somebody who is getting into vintage lenses, this is normally the one to do it because these are super cheap. It's a 58mm equivalent with an f2 aperture, and it just has a super unique look, especially on full frame. So this is fun to mess around with for photos, sort of for video. I don't use it as much for video, but this is just a neat little lens. It's hard to pair with other lenses just because of how unique the look is. I used to have a full set of these Russian primes. I had a 35, an 85, and this one, the Jupiter 1 and the Mir 24M, I want to say. The naming's a little weird. Didn't get a whole lot of use out of them, sold it, and then I bought another Helios because again, they are super cheap and they're just fun to have around, to mess around. Another thing here, it's not a lens, it's an adapter. The last thing I'll talk about is this SLR Magic Enamorphot 40. This is the older version. It's not the new compact one. This has a built-in rangefinder, but this is just another way to get a super unique look. Now, it's kind of the entry level. It is really the base level of getting into anamorphic. It's entry level, which is great. It means it's not that expensive, but it's not gonna be super sharp. The flares aren't gonna be super distinct, and because it's a 1.33 times adapter, the bokeh is not gonna be amazing, but it is a lot of fun to mess around with. Again, it's kind of like a gateway into anamorphic, and if you are looking for something super unique, super stylized, this can start to help you get there, especially if you were to pair it with a lens like the Helios. So there you go, that is my lens collection. The last thing I will say, of course, is that renting lenses is a super awesome way to try things out, try it before you buy it, get access to lenses that are much more expensive, because these, in the grand scheme of things, are on the cheap end of the spectrum. Like, this is the most expensive lens, and I still think it was under $2,000 when it was originally for sale. Maybe it was over $2,000 by 100, 200. But when you step into like a Cinema Prime, you're looking to spend at least $3,000, $4,000 per lens. And if you need to build out a set, that's gonna be a lot more money. But renting is an awesome way to get into those more expensive lenses or just to try stuff out. Again, I mentioned shooting on the Rokinon Cineprimes. Those were borrowed from a coworker. I didn't end up investing in them because I didn't love the look, but that was a cheap way to get in and to try it out rather than buying a whole set of 10 or whatever, however many there are in the set. Renting, borrowing, do what you gotta do to find the lenses that you like, and then when you like them, there's definitely so much value to buying the lenses that are right for you, that are working for you, and that are accomplishing the goals that you have set in front of you. So that's the collection here at the start of 2021. We will see what happens by the end of the year. Lenses are fun to trade around, you know, you sell one, you buy another to replace it. So we'll see where the collection ends up at the end of this year, but there you have it. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight into what is in my case.
All right, Drew, do your magic.